Welcome everyone to Higher Ground's Live911 Tech Talk today. Drone as a first responder programs have introduced a new paradigm into public safety. And so that's what we'll be talking about today. And we'll be joined by Matt Rowland and Michael Hickman from Fort Wayne's Police Department's DFR unit. My name is Jake White. I'm with Higher Ground. We are the company that patented Live911 technology that live streams 911 calls to real-time crime centers, patrol officers in the field, fire departments, and of course, drone as first responder programs. So I want to thank you all for attending today. And I'd like to encourage you to post any questions that you may have throughout this presentation in that Q&A tab located in your Zoom monitor there. We'll be sure to address them throughout this discussion and to save some time at the end as well. Okay, so Fort Wayne is the first public safety agency in Indiana to implement a DFR program. And our guests, Matt and Michael, have been instrumental in establishing and running that DFR program that essentially provides aerial intelligence to first responders before they arrive on the scene and after they arrive. So they're frequent speakers at conferences. I'm thankful to have them so that they could share their expertise with us. So good to see you guys. How are you this morning?
We're good. It's afternoon on this side of the country.
That's right. That's right. Well, good. You've already had your coffee and you're ready to go, I guess.
Yeah, oh, yes.
All right. Well, to get started, can you tell me and our listeners a little bit about Fort Wayne Police Department and the community you serve?
So Fort Wayne is in Northeast Indiana. We're about 30 miles from Ohio, about 45 minutes from Michigan. And we have about 280,000 people in our community. Fort Wayne Police Department has about 500 sworn officers. And we have 10 officers that are on our air support unit.
Okay, and I know you were instrumental in launching this air support unit. So when did that happen? And maybe a little bit, how has that grown in the last few years?
So we started in 2017. Well, if we go back even further, 2015, the negotiators went to ground school on our department, and that was before like Part 107 and some of the other things that have led the way to making making the ability to fly drones with more of a playbook. So Lieutenant Bowers, who's retired now, was in charge of negotiators. He had them go to ground school, and then as Part 107 developed in 2016, in 2017, the push was kind of on to create a drone team. So Officer Hickman and I were picked as part of the original 4 that went to some training. They picked 2 from the negotiations team. I was on the negotiations team. And then we had 2 officers that were pilots already. And Officer Hickman still is a certified pilot as well. And so we were there was 4 of us that started, and we're both still left on the team as it stands now. So as we've added people over the years, after the 4 of us kind of became that initial team, then they had more of an official and some command structure. So we had 5 patrol officers, and then they brought on Sergeant Bratmuller, who is also retired now, and then Lieutenant Bowers was in charge. So those 7 of us really started the team with 2 drones, unique drones is what they were back in 2017. Now in 2024, there's 10 officers on the team, 9 officers, 1 sergeant, and we have about 35 drones that are still active. Wow. We just got some new drones in last week. I think since 2017, we've registered about 69 drones. So we've been very blessed to have a good fleet of drones to fly and use.
Wow, that's impressive. Well, since your inception, how many tactical flights, do you have stats on maybe how many tactical flights or how many DFR flights you've actually executed?
It's approximately about 17,000 flights overall since the inception of the program. The early days of the programs, we didn't track the flights as well as we can now. So it's about 17,000 flights. And then with DFR, we're approaching 1,000 flights.
1,000? Wow.
Yes, 1,000.
And what type of, just give us a little background on like what type of calls for service are you submitting, are you sending those drones to? And maybe walk us through like an example of a particular or typical call.
So on the tactical side, we started with barricade hostage. That's kind of where we started, and now that's ballooned into much more than that. So we do Overwatch. We do that same Overwatch, but now we do a lot of missing kids, missing adults, from autistic kids, Alzheimer's patients. We'll fly Overwatch after a pursuit. So if someone gets out and runs, we do mapping now. So all life-threatening car crashes and outdoor crime scenes, we send an officer out and we map that. We do a lot of community events as well. We just did a demo at an elementary school this morning. So it's not all about necessarily crime fighting. It's kind of a culmination of everything and staying involved with the community as well.
That's interesting on that community outreach. Did you have any pushback from the community or was engagement kind of a way to get them involved, or how did that work with your community involvement?
We've been very open with the community, very transparent. From 2017, when the program was introduced and we had the media come out, we did a full-scale unveiling of the drones, told them what we were going to do, how we were going to use them. And then up until like 2 years ago, when we started to launch the DFR program, we invited the community in. We had the deputy mayor was here. We had a couple of council folks were here. So we've really invited them in to see what we're doing, how we're using drones. I've talked to city council a few times in the past when it comes to some budgetary things, and we've been very open and transparent.
That's great. I know there are probably a lot of attendees that are listening today, getting ready to try to start a DFR program or wanting to explore that possibility. Can you take us through kind of a little more detail about your journey and maybe, I don't know, some of the lessons you learned along the way that you can help? I know that you host a lot of people coming to your unit to tour and set up. Maybe what are some best tips or best practices that you can share with those people?
I would say go visit somebody that's doing a DFR program. When we started looking into this, now retired Chief Reed came to us, and he had a lot of push behind it, which was great that he supported us and tried to figure out what drones we were going to use, how we wanted to do it. Myself and Sergeant Brad Mueller went out to Chula Vista, California. We toured their facility like a lot of folks that are interested have done over the years. We met with them. We saw how they were doing their operations. When we were there, they had, I think, just expanded or were getting ready to expand from one site to 2 sites, and then now they're at 4 sites, I believe. But at the time, they were still early on, but they had, made that push from when I believe 2018 is when they started their program. So it was really great to see what they were doing, how they were doing it. So we kind of call that the Chula Vista model. What's interesting about Chula Vista is it's 52 square miles, and so they can cover their whole city with 4 launch locations. We're 110 square miles, but we're the same population approximately. So it's about 280 to 300,000 for 110 square miles versus the same population in 52 square miles. So that's always been an interesting fact to when you start laying out a program. Primarily our program's from one location now and can only cover a good portion of the downtown area with the one launch location. But that was some of the things that we had to learn, was where you're going to start, how you're going to fill it with manpower, what kind of drones are you going to use. We looked at a couple different options. back when we first started. So we kind of learned along the way, but had some help from them. And then people have come to us, and we've had site visits from other agencies that have come to see how we're doing it. So it's a lot of information sharing among agencies that's really been awesome to see, and a lot of networking.
Yeah, I was just wondering, budgeting or challenges of setting up a DFR program. I'm sure budgeting is at the top of the list. How do people get started to try to fund this program?
We were lucky that our chief was fully supportive of us, so we just had to come up with basically how we wanted to do it. We've been able to. There's some budgeting solutions. You have an IT department within the city, so that's possibilities of way to get some funding for software things, or some funding for other, if it's software related. Sometimes you can look at different line items in the budget. We're fortunate enough that we're able to put a line item in for the equipment and for the drones that we need into our yearly budget. So we just kind of have to look at it a year plus in advance. So the budget for next year will be due within about 3 weeks. So we'll have that budget, and we'll look at what we think the future is going to be for next year and try to budget appropriately. But budgets, when someone says, well, how much does it cost to run your program? It's a hard answer to really come up with, because we don't budget for the manpower necessarily, whereas other programs might have to budget for officer salaries and any kind of stuff like that. We basically budget for the physical equipment, and then our salaries and such are covered under the main city budget. It's a different budget. So, and we don't. Some departments also have like Flying Lion or a third party that are out on the roof as their remote pilots. We're handling all that internally with officers on our department. So it's not necessarily a budgetary thing for us, but it could be for someone else.
Right. So there's really no cookie cutter approach to it as far as budget wise or selecting the tools that you need. It's kind of up to each individual agency, right?
Yeah, and I would say that it's going to be different for every agency. For some agencies, they do like the third parties that's on the roof and flying the drones for them. For some agencies, they're using other officers. Some agencies are using other city employees that are Part 107. So sometimes it takes a little bit of creativity to figure out how to staff it. We've had some folks that have been on light duty that got their Part 107 that have helped us. So it's just kind of what works for your department.
Right. Good. Yeah. Thanks. That makes sense. Hey, just a reminder to you attendees that have logged on once we got started, just please feel free to put any questions that you have for Matt and Mike in that QA tab, and we will get to those. I know that there are a lot of components and tools, necessary that you kind of mentioned to get this DFR program started. One of them that you use is Live911, which allows you to hear incoming calls in real time and locate the precise location of the caller. Can you share with us, when did you start using Live911, and maybe how has that benefited your program?
So I think we finally got it spun up in the fall of 2022. Technical aspects that were beyond our control, we finally got it up and running. And then that is what gives us the jump when it comes to getting the drone launched for calls. And I'll let Mike, you've had quite a bit of experience with the Live911 and the calls for service.
Yeah, Live911, it's essential for how we do DFR here. The only way we're actually going to get the drone on scene for an officer is to hear that call coming in. And we found that sometimes we can jump it and beat them by several minutes, And sometimes we're on scene before the call's even hitting our CAD system. So they don't even know what's going on. We're there looking for the problem or person, whatever the call may be. So for us, it's essential to have that jump and hear those calls live. And then we can dictate what we want to go to, depending on what we're hearing. Sometimes, I think listening to Live 911, I've never realized how many non-essential types of calls we actually receive, or medical EMS type runs where the drone isn't really of any benefit unless they're, outside and maybe somewhere that may be difficult for fire or EMS to locate that subject, where we can relay that information. But on the police side, I mean, it's essential for us to do what we do up here.
Do you know, Mike, like the percentage of how many times you arrive on the scene before the patrol?
Yeah, we're keeping all those stats. Right now, we're sitting at about 73% of the time we're beating patrol to the scene. Wow. And I think that was pretty much the stats last year, was about 72, 73% at the end of the year. We were actually beating patrol by about 2.5 minutes to a scene.
Right. Hey, we are getting some questions. Mike had asked, how do you deploy a drone to a scene after hearing it on Live 911? Can you talk about that workflow from hearing a call to having a drone on the scene? Maybe just a little more detail on that.
Yeah. So right now we use a program called DroneSense, DroneSense Remote. It's their version of DFR, their DFR solution, basically. So we'll have that program up, and we'll have Live 911 running next to it. And then once we start receiving a call, we'll immediately put that address where that call was pinging on Live 911 into DroneSense. And it automatically populates our flight plan to where we're actually going to be going. And then as we're listening, if we deem that it's something that, hey, this is worthy of sending the drone, we're going to go, we basically just tell the drone to launch, and the drone automatically takes off and starts flying to the scene. So there's really, while the drone is en route, there's really not a whole lot of input on our end. It's all automated until the drone gets to the scene, and then we can take physical control. And we're actually flying it from a PS5 controller. So it's just like, oh, there it goes. Playing a video game. We're sitting inside flying it from a PS5 controller, and then we have a visual observer with the actual drone remote standing out on the rooftop.
We would like to thank Sony for the millions of dollars in development of the PS5 controller.
Exactly. You were rehearsing as a kid, right? You were just getting ready for this job.
Well, no, but we won't go there. Well, the original Nintendo.
There you go. How do you go about selecting this type of equipment? I know there's a lot of manufacturers out there. Like, what recommendations would you use? Would you tell agencies like to test it or beta test it, or how do you go about selecting the software, the drones themselves, and all the equipment that you need?
So we've been a DroneSense customer since 2018-ish. And we actually worked with them on the beta side of DSR development. So we were kind of early adopters to their DFR solution. And it works well for us because we use it on the tactical side, and it works well on the tactical side. The one thing that I always tell folks, though, is just because we're using DroneSense doesn't necessarily mean that's the right answer for you. I would encourage people to get demos, especially now there's several different companies out there. I'm not going to list them all, but there's several companies out there that are doing DFR, and pick the right one for you. We've had 3 this last time when we did our last contract. We had 3 that came to us and showed us their stuff, and we flew it and we checked it out. And, in the end, we decided that DroneSense was the right solution for us. But there's competition breeds better stuff. There's stuff that's better in DroneSense now because of other competition. There's stuff that's better in other products that's because of the stuff that DroneSense has been innovative. So just keep that in mind when you're looking for a software solution. There's more than one. It doesn't have to be the first person that does the demo. Now, I'm sure there's some companies cussing me right now, but I'm serious. When it comes from an end user side, make sure that it's the software that works for you and your solution. Some of the new stuff that's out there probably will work really well for other agencies. It just right now it doesn't seem to fit how we deploy drones and use drones. And remember, our DFR program has a 2 to 3 mile radius, so we still have that tactical side that still has to go out beyond that and fly drones, move video around. And if it's going to be a long-term operation, we're going to send people that are going to have more of like the trunk deployments, as we would call from the tactical side. We're going to send officers that have drones with them to kind of take that over. DFR is going to hand it off, and then if there's enough manpower, DFR is going to go back into operation. So we could have 2 or 3 different things going on at the same time. And then all of that working together and that workflow with DroneSense has worked for us. But there's more solutions out there. A year ago, there wasn't as many, and we just keep getting more solutions, so it creates better products for the end user.
Right. Thanks. Yeah, and continuing on, kind of setting up before we get to results, but I know, so now we've selected the equipment, the drones, the software, Live911, what have you, but I know, Mike, also you're like the FAA expert. So what about the whole process of working with them and getting that COA approval and things like that?
Yeah, over the years, public safety has had quite a large influence with the FAA. And they've actually, here in the last, I'd say, 2 years, made the process for public safety to fly not only just DFR type operations beyond visual line of sight, but tactical operations as well. They made it a lot easier for us to get that. And one of the ways we do that is through a certificate of authorization, or a COA, which is actually, a lot of people don't know, is under Part 91 of the federal regulations and not Part 107. They're totally separate. But the biggest thing is you have to be approved by the FAA to be a public aircraft operator. And what that means is you have to go to your city attorney or your county attorney or whatever legal entity handles the legal aspect of your agency. And they write a letter that says you are basically a government agency and you can operate as a public aircraft operator. And then the FAA approves that, and they get you access into the CAP system, which is where you file all of your COAs. And once you put in, your operation and how you plan to fly and what aircraft you're going to use, the FAA basically, they send you this COA that says, hey, here's the limitations that you can fly with, and reporting requirements, and you're good to go. They've made it very, I won't say painless, but they've made it much easier than what it has been, when drones first came online back in 17, 18 time frame.
Yeah. Is that process lengthy, or you said it was pretty easy, but how much time did it take?
It was lengthy.
Yeah, it was very lengthy. But now, once you get into the CAP system and you start filling out the information, you can knock out a COA request within, I'd say, 30 minutes to an hour. And within a week or two, you're starting to receive those COAs back, whereas before you'd submit one and it may take months before you hear anything back from the FAA. And now it's about a week or two and you start to receive those approvals back and you can start flying.
And the FAA's done a lot to streamline the process. But Mike's been pretty modest when he says how much work it took to get our first BB loss COA. There was a lot of work. There was a presentation. There was a meeting with 35 FAA folks. And that process has now turned into basically a cookie cutter form that you can fill out and submit. And I don't know what the timeframes are now, but I know that it was down to less than a week, couple weeks maybe. Whereas the process for us took 8 months, 6 months.
6 months
from
the time we started.
It's the process is becoming more and more streamlined.
Yeah, it's really evolved. What about your training or training for the new people that you hire as your staff has increased? What certifications or pilot training to be that teleoperator, I believe is what you call them technically? What's required there?
So we have a team of 10, and those officers are on our team. They have drones. They self-deploy for other missions. They're all Part 107 pilots. They can help backfill when it comes to anything with DFR. And then the one program we have that we don't probably give enough credit to those folks, we have 10 folks on our department that are not on our team, but they have on their own sought out and got their Part 107. We train them 8 hours a year to give them a basic training of our equipment and an understanding of things. And then we can use them to backfill when they're on duty, whether it's on a tactical mission, tactical deployment. Some of our folks are on vacation. We need to fill, spots like that. We can also backfill them up here with the DFR program as a teleoperator. And it's a program we've had going on for about 4 years. And then when we have openings on our team, the last 6 folks that have gotten on our team have actually come from that, what we call advanced VO program. So we're kind of giving them a stepping stone, as you might say, towards being on the team eventually.
Yeah. Well, since you were one of the early adopters and still technically are, I'm not sure if you know how many DFR programs are in the United States right now or not. Do you happen to know roughly?
I want to say it's 30 to 40 maybe. We were the first in Indiana, and I think there's a couple, 1 or 2 in Indiana that are looking at spinning up or getting close to, if not already. I think there was probably 15 when we started in the whole country.
Yeah, I think those numbers, that's tracking with what I kind of have. And I know that there are hundreds, looking to do that right now. So maybe I was just going to say, now that you've, been up and running for several years, what are the kind of benefits, or what are those key real world examples that you would encourage other people to go ahead and move on with their DFR program because it's benefited your agency so much?
I think Mike's got an example of a couple good wins.
Yeah, I mean, as we mentioned earlier, the biggest advantage is being able to get eyes on a scene so much quicker. And we had a call last year. A gentleman called in. We heard it come across Live911. And he said that he came home and found a woman hiding under his 14-year-old son's bed. And when he confronted this lady, she jumped out the window and took off running. Well, we heard that call come in, so we already had the drone en route. And he gave us an amazing description of this woman. One of the best descriptions I've ever heard, and it was almost exact when we found her. But he said she took off running, and he gave us a direction. So when we got the drone there, we started kind of checking in that area, and sure enough, we panned the camera down, and we saw her walking right underneath the drone. And like I said, it matched her description to a T. And so we just stayed overhead and called it out for road officers of where she was going. And she came to a park that was kind of a wooded area. So we lost her when she went under the trees, but we just stayed overhead, and she never came out on either side of that wooded area. So we knew that she was still in there, even though we couldn't see her. So we relayed that to officers, and they walked through this wooded area, and sure enough, they found her standing next to a tree on the phone calling for a ride for somebody to come pick her up. And she ended up having a warrant, and they ended up hitting her with invasion of privacy, and I think maybe even some sort of sexual crime. I don't remember what the charge was. But that was one of our first big wins, where we actually found somebody, and she ended up having multiple felony charges.
Wow. What about, I think I read that Chula Vista reported like 25% of their drone, when they send them out, it actually doesn't need to send out units. Like they're optimizing their resources because they don't need to send anybody. Do you have that experience as well?
We do. That's actually one of the areas that we're trying to build up the most right now and really work on. But we're sitting somewhere, usually we fluctuate between like 15 and 20% of the time. We can get the drone there and actually clear the call so nobody has to make the scene. And typically a lot of those that we're finding now are more suspicious person calls, where we get there and check the area and we're not finding that person. Or suspicious vehicles, things like that. Reckless drivers that get called in. We can check to see if we can find that vehicle. Or if we find the vehicle, we can follow it for a little ways and see if they're swerving or doing whatever the caller said. So I think that's the biggest focus for us right now, is how can we use this as more of a tool to help relieve calls for service and manpower, especially in the summertime when people take off and the weather's nice and call volume goes up. So yeah, about 20% of it.
They had a lady that called in a suspicious vehicle. The drone went and checked it and gave patrol a disregard. And when she was called back and told that it checked out and there wasn't anything wrong with it, she asked, well, I didn't see a squad car go by. And that we said, well, we cleared it with a drone. And she just thought that was the coolest thing ever, that we could clear a call for service with a drone.
Right. I know. Exactly. This is a sexy topic. Those drones are really cool. And we are just running out of time. But if you don't mind, can I keep you for a few more minutes? There's still some questions coming in. Attendees, just so you know, I'll send you a recording of this. If you need to jump, you're going to get a recording. But I am getting some questions here that I just would like to go over. And thanks you guys for saying. One was kind of back to what we were talking about the community. There was a question, did you or do you use social media to improve community relations between your program and the community?
We're actually on Instagram at FWPD ASU. So we would love to have you follow us. We update that from time to time with events and trainings and some of the stuff that we have going on. So you can find us on Instagram.
Okay, perfect. John, just so you know, I know you're asking about Live911, how to set it up. So I'm going to follow up with you directly after this. He's saying that for their drone program, it could be a game changer because there's some delayed calls for accurate info, which is their biggest issue. So Live911 can certainly help you with that. Get back to you.
The other nice thing, I'll touch on that quick. The nice thing about Live911 is it follows the cell phone. So when the cell phone is moving around, so you can see it bebopping around if it's moving from street to street. And also, if you've got a directional issue, as sometimes callers aren't sure on what direction they're going. So sometimes they'll say we're northbound, and you can watch the phone, and it's actually going southbound. So those are two really big things that help us with the drone, because we get the drone in the area and we see where the ping for the phone is, and especially if we're looking for that, we can be pinpoint. We found someone in a field last week, actually, because we could see where the phone was hitting, and it took us right to where they were. I think that was a domestic.
Good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, exactly. Kind of forgot to mention that earlier too with Live911. There's questions. I know that you have this 100-mile radius, but you're primarily focusing on downtown, but there's a question about battery life on the drone. Do you have any issues with that?
Well, I mean, batteries are the key to making everything work, right? We wish we had more batteries. We're flying M30s right now, and we're getting about 30 minutes, 35 minutes. We just got a couple of new ones, so hopefully the batteries will get a little bit more out of them. Then we're using M30s with the drone sense, and everything's working really well.
Good. Good. Well, that really sums up the questions that I have. Thanks, John, for the cell number. That we have. Is there anything, I always ask the guests too, is there anything that I didn't cover today that is kind of something that you want to make sure people understand or hear before we close out?
You can't do this without support. You can't do this without your team. We can't do this without our retired chief, Steve Reed, current chief, Scott Caudell. Retired deputy chief, Marty Bender, was always a big supporter. His replacement, deputy chief Scott Burning, is a supporter of us and our drones. And we can't do this without our team. Besides me and Mike, Sergeant Mark Brooks, Ben Young, Detective Steve Huss, Trent Hollinger, Detective Dan Hartman, Craig Walters, Troy Wadley, and Javon Johnson. Those folks are what makes this what it is. Mike and I do a lot because we're signed full time, but those guys also are a huge support as well, from patrolmen to detectives to command.
Right. Yes, that's good. It takes a team. I'm so thankful for you guys. You shared such wonderful information for everybody here today, and I really appreciate it. On behalf of Higher Ground, we truly thank you. I've posted it up here. some contact information. Again, this is contact information for me, but also Matt has agreed to answer any questions that you may have after this that you didn't think of during the presentation. Feel free to reach out to Matt and Mike. I will also, like I mentioned, email this recording of the session. If there are some colleagues that you'd like to send the link to, they can watch it on demand. We'll also have it up on the Live911 website. So Matt and Mike, thanks again. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for attending today's Tech Talk. I will see you next time. So in the meantime, stay safe, and we'll see you again in a couple months. Thanks.
Happy flying.
Thank you.
Thanks.